I consider myself commander-in-chief of a transnational, revolutionary, militant, internationalist political party like the Black Panthers.
Thank you, motorcycle.
But for shy people. And I am on a never-ending world tour to overthrow the oppressive ideology of what I call extrovert supremacy. And since I was I guess a period you call middle school in Slovenia, but high school in the US or secondary school, I had this form of hatred directed at me for just being quiet in the classroom. And you didn't really have like a sort of legiancy of liberation or like hate crime legislation or an ism, to turn to. So I just made one up, which is essentially what my book is. And I think the whole art world is implicated in this sort of extrovert supremacy. I go to art galleries because I like that particular type of contemplative silence. And it's like the way they do access in Britain is they'll bring in DJs and skateboards, and it's like that's not why I went to art galleries in the first place. So not fitting into these spaces and declaring my own zone and my own nation. And I found it very interesting being in this context of Slovenia as a nation that's very new in the 90s, and also in terms of Slovenia as the first country to declare independence from the Communist Federation of Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
So this idea of this independent state, which I call Aspergerstan, which is a sort of coalition of people with autistic spectrum disorder, although I wouldn't call it that, I'll claim it, shyness, quietness, the awkward person, declaring their, like, how much does it, in terms of global politics, does this sort of power formation still take place? So think of like President Trump, he's still referred to in terms of the high school jock.
Yeah.
And in Britain, the Labour leader who lost Ed Miliband, said he lost because he was like a nerd. So it's like, I think at the highest level of global power, this sort of high school teen movie things still operate. So how can we actually work with that and change it into like a means for actually emancipatory politics?
Yes. Well, I guess a higher level than just jocks and nerds.
Yeah.
And how do you approach this? How do you approach this this problematic? Is it now a gathering, or is it now all in an active mode of pursuing this change, or is it more gathering people and awareness to then make this change? You know what I mean?
Sure. I find there's already social movements happening, and for example, certainly in Britain and the US, you have what is called the neurodiversity movement. So people with autism spectrum disorder or clinical diagnosis, they don't see themselves as a disorder as such, but rather another way of being, another sensibility, not something to be corrected. So that's actually a movement that is actually in place, and it's adopted my book. And so at Brown University, which is an Ivy League university in the US, which has this open curriculum, they teach my book as a mode of sort of disability politics. And also within zine culture, I noticed there's quite a burgeoning underground of zine culture in Slovenia, a way of reclaiming things aspects of personality which might not be marketable. I guess it takes inspiration from like LGBTQI liberation movements, insofar, like homosexuality was in the psychiatric diagnostic manual until 1976, and it was only removed by quite a small vote by the American Psychiatric Association, and obviously that would be considered absurd today. But I find this mode of art writing opens up spaces. So generally, left-wing writing in Britain is just like someone writing a very long plain prose academic essay, and they release a book by Verso, and it becomes a sort of celebrity thing. So within art writing, there's so many different formats of writing you can take. So the opening chapter of my book is just a constitution, and I've plastered bits of it around the city. Also inventing my own vocabulary, that I want to travel beyond the source of the book. So I want people to identify extrovert supremacists in their community and extrovert normativity in their community. And so just using these compounds from other radical political movements. So the revolt of the introvert is called the intifada.
Does this word have a particular meaning? Because it's quite foreign to me.
Fada. So
yeah.
the Palestinian anti-colonial revolt is called the Intifada.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a compound of introvert and intifada
I see.
together.
Okay.
So, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So
it is quite important,
yeah.
right, to tackle this issue where the extroversion
Yeah.
propagates messages so effortlessly,
yeah,
but in itself it is quite rash in
Yeah.
its propagation,
Yeah.
quite not thought out through.
Yeah, yeah.
It just happens.
sure.
And the best decisions should not always be
Yeah.
decisions that just
But I think
happen.
there's something about the whole way in which liberal democracy operates. Is like politicians are like car salesmen. Only certain type of people can run for election.
Yeah.
Only certain personalities can run for election. So you're seen as like represented, but you can't represent yourselves. And the whole way in which debate takes place in like a parliament is like not conducive. There's other ways in which we make decisions, other ways in which we contemplate, other ways in which we arrive at truths which have nothing to do with this crossfire of like mass media, corporate media, and like parliamentary exchange. So everything. I was trying to think how we can think of other ways of registering political gestures. So I was involved to some extent in the Occupy movement, and they invented their own languages. So there was like, this meant jazz hands, meant like consensus decision making, and then looking through the history of like revolutionary radical movements, like this obviously like, you know, solidarity, and then this is the Black Power salute. So you just shoot your fist in the air. So yeah, so this is like the Shy Power salute, which is a bit more like a cough.
Yeah.
And I want these gestures to just travel, like, so they have some. People can recognise each other through borders. We can create new transnational identities. You know, like staring into space can be like a political gesture. Staring at the sea can be a political gesture. Turning your back can be a political gesture. I think there's loads of other ways we can register politics. I even think of depression. Like the way I author my depressive episodes is I think of my depressive episodes as a form of strike. So my body has natural capacity to say when enough is enough, and and I take my inspiration from this performance artist from Northern Ireland called Helena Walsh, and she was had an eating disorder, but she reframed it as a hunger strike.
Which is interesting, you know, because let's say, for example, somebody who's extroverted will obviously build on this extroversion as their power, as their means of communication, because it is better than somebody who does not possess this means of communicating.
Sure.
And then when you mentioned, what was her name? The artist, the Irish.
Helena Walsh.
Yeah, when you mentioned Helena Walsh and how she transformed a disability into a means of communication, but you know, I say disability, and maybe we all might say this. It's just a word. It's her state was transformed into communication, and I love when you say doing whatever can be a form of communication. Because
even biting your nails, right? That's registering some manifestation of discontent or contentment. There's only certain forms of gestures that take place, say, within politics. So I think of like fascism, and obviously your most famous living export, Laibach, which has this performative fascism, and how like the hand gestures like Mussolini at the pulpit, like it goes hand in hand with like authoritarianism and like so it's like if imagine your political leaders just communicate like that, or like bit their nails, or like what different types of politics would it produce?